Hello, welcome to our Purple Insider Extra bi-week breakdown. Matthew Coller along with Sam Ekstrom. You can listen to, by the way, our full bi-week bonanza on the podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, just type in Purple Insider and plus our written work, purpleinsider.substack.com. So we are going to run through every position for the Vikings, including coaching we'll talk about as well in our bi-week breakdown here, and then look forward to what's coming up next for the Vikings. So Sam, let's start out with the quarterback position, and let's grade Kirk Cousins for his first 6 games of the 2021 season.
All right. First question, though. You're the host of the show, so you decide the criteria. Are we grading relative to expectation or relative to the best quarterback in the NFL?
I think it's relative to the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then, just overall, like his performance, has it been, where you thought it was going to be this year, above, below? I think that gets factored in, but I think you have to look at the rest of the league and how well everyone's playing quarterback and say, where does he fit into that mix?
For sure. Well, the crazy thing is that even by that criteria where you're judging him against the best, it's still a pretty high grade through the first 6 games. I mean, he has had 2 games and a couple moments in other games where it hasn't been good. You could say the same probably about all quarterbacks, though. I think it's a B+. I mean, I think the quarterback play has been well above average, well above expectation, and, toward the top of the league in some categories, like when kept clean this year. And the pressure is always going to be an issue, but when kept clean, Kirk Cousins is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL this season. And you have to respect what he's done late in games. We've said before, that's kind of one of the things we've been begging to see more of from him. He had 1 game-winning drive in his first 2 seasons with the Vikings, and he could have had up to 4 this year if they had not fumbled and not missed a field goal. I mean, he's done it on a regular basis. So I like B+. Maybe it's a generous grade, but I think it's been quality.
No, I think B+ is right. I think if we were ranking all the quarterbacks in the NFL, you probably don't get to double digits without mentioning the way that Kirk Cousins has played so far this year. The one criticism would be the inconsistency of the offense overall, that if you look at the percentage of drives that they score on, they're 18th in that. When you look at the total points, they're 12th. They have second halves where the offense doesn't show up. And we'll get to the coaching discussion. I think it's part of it, but there's also been some timid play from Kirk Cousins. He has not pushed the ball into double coverage down the field. They haven't gotten 40-yard pass interferences or too many contested catches from Adam Thielen or Justin Jefferson deep. So that's a nitpick, but I think a reasonable criticism. And at the end of games, he's come through, but the long stretches of play where they didn't produce points sort of set them up for those spots. So as good as he has been, I would put him more toward maybe from 9th to 12th somewhere in the NFL, which I think is a B+ grade. He has certainly been good enough for them to have better than a 3-3 record, though. So it's been a very good start for Kirk Cousins, and I think one of the better stretches of his entire career. On the running backs, I think they also deserve a high grade. They may be overused at times, but Alexander Mattison filling in for Dalvin Cook, and then the way Dalvin Cook has played when he's been healthy outside of the Cleveland game where he was playing through an injury, I think Mattison and Cook have been exactly what we always expect from Mattison and Cook.
Yeah, I don't know what letter you're going to put on it. I would give it a B. And I refrain from giving it an A because, unfortunately, the thing you fear with Dalvin Cook has happened, is that he's gotten banged up and he's had to miss a couple games, and there's been a couple turnovers along the way. I don't think there's a massive difference between Cook and Mattison. I do think there's a subtle difference, and it can be the difference between a short run and the touchdown Dalvin Cook scored last Sunday, where if you watch it back, especially on the All-22, the way he can just slither through these minuscule gaps and sort of just sniff them out instinctually. I mean, his vision is great. That's one thing that Cook has that Mattison does not. But I do think the production from Mattison is hard to argue with. He's still putting up about 4.5 yards a carry. I think he's as good, if not better, in the passing game than Cook. So between the two of them, running back production is good. And I think the problems in the running game are more coaching related based on the decisions of when to run than the running backs themselves. So I like a B grade. I think that's solid. I think to get an A, you would just need to have like Cook at his best for 6 games, which we haven't had.
Yeah, you're right about that. There have been other seasons for Dalvin Cook in recent years that have started out where people are saying, wait, if he performs like this for a full season, could a running back compete for MVP and not just quarterbacks? And then ultimately, things sort of even out. The 2 fumbles have to be factored in as well. Although if you only had 2 fumbles through 6 games, you would probably go, oh, well, that's fine. The timing of those fumbles was a little tough. But we also have a lot of great plays to talk about from these 2. The touchdown against Detroit for Alexander Mattison when he fights his way into the end zone. Dalvin Cook's entire game against both Carolina and Arizona. Terrific play there. I'm going to go a little higher. I'm going to go with a B+ from them, in part because how many teams can say when their number 1 running back, who is a Pro Bowler and a legitimate superstar and a top 3 fantasy pick, when he goes down, your offense still operates. And against Seattle, for example, Madison was terrific in that screen game, terrific at pounding the ball in the second half. So you can't expect much more from that. If you were just grading Dalvin Cook, I think I would go lower because he hasn't been as available. But when you add that the backup can come in and perform well, I think they deserve a very high grade. Now, moving on to the wide receivers, Thielen, Jefferson, and a guy you may have mentioned once or twice on this YouTube channel, Sam, KJ Osborne. We'll mix in D.D. Westbrook for a few plays into this. Grade the wide receivers.
Let's get your grade first. You can set the bar, and I'll go over, under, or the same.
I'm going to give him an A. I mean, I think that a third wide receiver emerging, that has been the big criticism and very reasonable criticism over recent years when they tried Laquan Treadwell, Tajay Sharp, Kendall Wright. And remember last year, the Vikings are playing Green Bay and they throw a deep pass to Tajay Sharp of all people in a big situation. And then they did it again later against Tampa Bay, another team that they needed to beat last year. And now you have a receiver who you can go deep to in overtime, looking for a win, and he makes a spectacular play. Yeah, there's nitpicks on Thielen and Jefferson. Jefferson had a couple of drops early in the year. Thielen mostly got shut out in the Detroit game until the very end. But I think those are just complete nitpicks. And where they've also been good, I think, is they've been asked to run block a lot because you don't have the 2 tight end sets, and they've managed that pretty well. I think this group is one of the best in the entire NFL. They already were, even if KJ Osborne didn't emerge. But now, as a legitimate weapon, you couldn't ask for much more. I give him an A.
Yeah, the run blocking is a sneaky good part of Osborne's game. Thielen had a big run block on Dalvin Cook's touchdown last week. I think without Osborne, I'd probably go A- because, crazy enough, Justin Jefferson is going to pass 1,000 yards this year with ease, and he's left a lot on the table. I mean, he had opportunities early this season that he didn't take advantage of, some drops that you wouldn't expect, and a couple fumbles as well. But, I mean, he still is spectacular. Adam Thielen, when targeted, still very good. Talk of his decline after the Detroit game, I think highly overrated. But then you bring Osborne into the mix, and suddenly I think someone tweeted he's the 4th best, or the Vikings have the 4th best wide receiver trio in terms of yards in the NFL, which is crazy after years of inconsistency at that wide receiver 3 spot. That's a huge boost to this team, and it's helped Kirk Cousins late in games have another option when his top targets get shut down. So Osborne's emergence has to push this to an A. I fully agree with you.
Now, in terms of grading positions, tight end is always weird because it's usually like one guy or 2 guys. So if we add them into the receiver group, I would knock it down to an A-. I think Tyler Conklin has been okay. They've gotten almost nothing out of Chris Herndon, who they traded for a touchdown against Carolina, but that's it. They've tried other people like Ben Ellefson to be blocking tight ends. That position has not given them a ton, but I think Tyler Conklin has been serviceable as a tight end.
Yeah, I would give the position group as a whole a C. I would give Tyler Conklin a B. Conklin has shown the ability to get kind of loose in those intermediate zones, which I don't know if we were seeing from Kyle Rudolph last year. You can count on Conklin for a 20-yard, 25-yard pass, which is nice to have. And I think he's pretty good in the run game too. The position group as a whole has really been overshadowed by the depth they have at receiver, which is not the style we expected this team to play. Losing Irv Smith had a huge impact, I think, on the way this offense is run, maybe to its benefit. But the fact that you traded a pretty high day 3 pick for Chris Herndon, he has more penalties than catches at this point in the year. that's a huge red flag. Ben Ellefson is, hurt and also just a blocking tight end. Same with Luke Stalker. So the position group does not get high grades, but I like Tyler Conklin. I think he's held up pretty well.
Right. If we included it to be overall all the weapons included, then I think that group has been great. And Conklin has not dropped the ball when given an opportunity to prove that he can be a top tight end, but the rest of the group has just not contributed. So I would agree with a C. The offensive line. Now, this is a little tricky because if you're projecting forward with Christian Darrisaw, this is a different grade, I think. But the way that they've played so far, we've had some games where we've been impressed and Kirk Cousins has been kept clean for basically the entire game. And then we've had some games like against the Cleveland Browns where it was sort of same old Vikings offensive line. I'll go first on this grade. I'm going to give them a C, solid C for the start of the season with the potential to be a B or B plus if Christian Darrisaw plays the whole rest of the season the way he did against Carolina. But I think Rashad Hill really struggled as the starting left tackle, kind of as expected, but maybe even more than we thought he would given his experience. Oli Udoh has 7 penalties so far this year. That's a lot for a guard to have that many holding penalties. And we have not seen the progress that we discussed in the preseason about Garrett Bradbury. So maybe a C. I could even bump it down to a C minus, but Cousins' pressure percentage is not all that high. So I think that things have evened out a little bit there. Ezra Cleveland's been okay at left guard. I'll say they've just been okay, which is an upgrade from where I would have graded them at this point last year.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to look at them neutrally and not compare them to previous lines, because I think compared to previous Vikings teams, it's a pretty good line. But overall, it still is very average. I think they cost them the Browns game in large part. But as you mentioned, Cousins has stayed upright most of the season. And despite some pretty poor individual games, the unit as a whole has often produced good results. So I don't know if the ends justify the means in this case. I think the process is still a little flawed in the way they constructed it. And as you laid out, I really like the future of this line. And hey, maybe Wyatt Davis is next with the way that Udoh has begun to struggle. Do they start incorporating Davis a little bit at guard the same way that Darrisaw kind of eased his way in? That's something to watch for in the second half of the year. But I was going to say C minus, and that's with upside. C minus is kind of the floor, and I think it only gets better. But I am disappointed in Ezra Cleveland not being maybe a little further along this year, and Garrett Bradbury in the pass game, not seeing a whole lot of progress there either.
Right. And Bradbury ranks among the lowest in pass blocking once again by Pro Football Focus overall as a unit. And this sort of tells you how it's helped them to have a lot of quick passes. They rank by PFF as a unit as 25th in pass blocking, and yet the pressure percentage is down. So some of that is just the strategy of getting the ball out quickly with Kirk Cousins, where he's done that a lot more. But the potential of the line, and as you mentioned, Davis might be in the mix here at some point, I think is much higher than it has been in the first 6 games. The defensive line, Sam, fire away on this one.
Defensive line gets a B for me. I think there's great things. Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, those are A pluses. And then you've got some D's like Sheldon Richardson. That's not working out so far. Armon Watts is playing better than Sheldon Richardson right now. Armon Watts is the number 6 PFF defensive tackle. And I know that's in a sample size of 150 snaps, but that's not nothing either. So that's solid. Michael Pierce is hurt, not great. Dalvin Tomlinson playing very well. So it's mixed. DJ Wanham, bad. Stephen Weatherly, pretty mediocre. It's kind of feast or famine. There's not a lot of guys that are just neutral. I feel like I've got a strong opinion on all of them. So I'm going to level out at B, which is still above average because I think those high enders are getting you to the point where your defensive line is a strength and not a weakness.
I think if teams hadn't run so successfully against them in the first 5 weeks, and even Carolina, when they wanted to run, they could. They just chose to keep dropping passes. But I think that factors into me giving them a C plus. That's kind of the best I can do here. Danielle Hunter has been Danielle Hunter. He's been one of the best players in the league, and you weren't sure coming into the season whether that was going to be the case. So that's been a big hit for them. And Everson Griffin has as well. They wanted him to be a situational player. Now he's a starter. But part of that is that no one else really emerged to help with that role. So they had to kind of say, all right, well, Everson, it's all you. The limited amount that Michael Pierce has been able to play because of his injuries. Dalvin Tomlinson, I think, has been very good. The fill-in players look like they're starting to show some signs, like you mentioned, Armon Watts. I'll even give James Lynch some credit for making a play, but also even on tape showing up and playing pretty well against Carolina. But this has not been a dominant defensive line. I think that even Baker Mayfield got harassed a bit, but even Jared Goff had some time to throw. Sam Darnold had time to throw. Mike Zimmer was critical even of their pass rush and said we could have been a lot better, but Darnold had some time to throw. So I think that there is room for improvement here. How much they can improve, I guess we'll find out as we go forward. But if Sheldon Richardson breaks out and has one of those big Sheldon Richardson games where he's spectacular, there is potential to raise this grade. Or if someone like Patrick Jones emerges and gets an opportunity as we go forward. But I think it's been okay. I don't think it's been one of the league's better lines. The linebacker position, mostly sans Anthony Barr, but the last 2 weeks he's been back. And I think, Sam, he's made a positive impact there.
I would agree. I think if you account for the games where Vigil was a liability in the run, I'll give it a B+. I was going to go A-, and then knocked it down to B+. I think, not having Barr for 4 weeks. Vigil was very good early against the pass-oriented teams, struggled more against the run-oriented teams. That's to be expected with him. Eric Kendricks, not grading that well overall on PFF, but I think eye test kind of betraying those numbers. I think still very, very strong, makes interceptions, always in the right place. Had one bad game against Cleveland, but I think Kendricks is still playing at a high level. So I like that group. And I like knowing, too, that Vigil is a pretty strong number 3. And I think Blake Lynch is even a good number 4 if you want to go down the depth chart a little bit. So I'll give him B+ with room to improve as Barr kind of finds his rhythm.
Yep, I'm going to give them a B. When you ask somebody to fill in for Anthony Barr, it's a lot to ask. Nick Vigil was okay in doing so. If you don't have a massive fall off there, you've done pretty well for yourself. Kendricks has played very well. His one-handed interception is certainly a highlight to remember. But again, I sort of go back to that running game. And when opponents have been able to run so successfully, you can't really pin it on, well, it was just this guy or just that guy. It's really the front 7 that is responsible for stopping the run. And when opponents just were able to, with ease, beat them back down the field, I can't give them an A, even though I think that Kendricks has played very well. And Anthony Barr, since he's come back, has been an upgrade, but has not yet been an impact player for the Vikings, I think, as he works his way back from being away from football. So this is another one that has a chance to be better as Anthony Barr gets back into it. Let's just grade the whole secondary as opposed to corners and safeties, because like tight ends, there's only 2 safeties. Secondary as a whole, Sam, I'll start with this one. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give it a solid B for the secondary. I was concerned at first in those first couple of games that it was going to be much worse than a solid B. And then recently they've come together. They've also had some good breaks. They've had some overthrows. They've had some drops that have helped them out in terms of statistically, but Xavier Woods has been good. Harrison Smith has been fine. And Patrick Peterson, until he got hurt, I thought was having a good season after the first 2 weeks. So I'll go solid B for the secondary. This one, though, has the potential to go the other way in the second half of the season.
Yep, Peterson injury really hurts. I thought Peterson was kind of the rock at that cornerback position for this team, what they desperately needed. And it's unfortunate to see that he'll miss at least 3 games if you're a Vikings fan. I'm going to go C. I can't get over some of those breakdowns early in the year that really cost you opportunities to win. Bashaud Breeland was a huge culprit, and he has played better, which gives him maybe a little upside. Cam Dantzler is a wild card to me. Xavier Woods has been mostly good, but still has moments where he's behind the play. Harrison Smith, I think, has been a net positive. He hasn't been spectacular. I don't think he has an interception yet this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he still is always in the right place. And I think it's an average group. We've seen ups, we've seen downs, and we don't know what really to expect without Peterson after the bye. I go C.
It's possible I'm giving him too much credit for the last couple of weeks, but even without a completely dominant pass rush, it has felt like there's been a lot of quarterbacks sort of looking around for answers. That might be Mike Zimmer, that might be good coverage, but I think the way Peterson has played in recent weeks upped my grade a little bit, but I think you're fair in doing so. Okay, last two here, special teams coaching. Special teams, I don't know. I mean, just 1 week it's an A and 1 week it's an F. So maybe I guess it goes under a C in the middle. There's been some great kicks. There's been some great punts. There's a blocked punt. There's a missed kick. It's just been all over the place. I don't even know what to grade this exactly. I guess if it's all over the place, you give it a C. It's been better at times than last year. It's been worse at times than last year, or just as bad. So, and the return units have offered very, very little. I guess I'll go C minus then.
Yeah, it has to be a C something. I'll just go right in the middle and give it a C. Amir Abdullah, who they just released, by the way, I expect he'll be back at some point. But, Abdullah had one good kickoff return. Dede Westbrook scares both of us on punt return. The Jordan Berry has been a nice upgrade at punter. I like that. Greg Joseph has been a complete roller coaster. Don't know what to expect week in and week out. It's better than last year. They're not getting as many penalties, boneheaded mistakes. Dan Chisena isn't missing tackles every week, but I still don't know what to expect. I mean, I think that when you're dealing with young players and a revolving door at your specialists, this is going to happen. So yeah, it's a C.
All right. Coaching. I will let you go first on grading the entire coaching staff for the Vikings through 6 weeks.
Thanks for giving me the toughest one first. Well, let me just talk my way through it. I think that Mike Zimmer has done a good job of adjusting defensively to some early season woes. I think that his philosophy at the end of halves is negative. I think Clint Kubiak has been probably about neutral. I think that your position coaches, if you want to incorporate them a little bit, Keenan McCardell deserves a lot of credit. I think Phil Rauscher deserves some credit for that offensive line, the good things they've done. I think it's a C+. I mean, I think that you've gotten some performances, from a new look defense with a lot of new guys coming together. I think that they've done enough good that I can kind of give coaching on that side of the ball a little bit of love. On offense, Clint Kubiak is, he's a big controller of the way that offense looks, and I still have question marks about him. So I think he's a little bit maybe on the negative side with room to improve. Ryan Ficken on special teams has improved them. I think it's a C+ for the year. A lot of room to go situationally, and I don't know what else to say about it. I think C+ is fair. I'm curious where you're going to go.
I was going to go D+. I think that the overall is that you needed to start this season better than 3-3. And 3-3 and sitting in the 7th spot going into your bye week is not where you want to have this overall football team, considering the toughest part of your schedule is coming up next. So the overall, resting on the coaching staff, 3-3 is just not good enough. You've played down to your competition for 2 straight weeks, and it's been because of a lot of decision making. It's been 25-yard field goals, not taking advantage of the end of halves, the decisions in terms of when to run the football, play calling at times, very, very conservative play calling. And I think that these things are just being enhanced in the NFL with teams playing much more aggressive. So when it feels like you're slipping behind, it's very hard to give a good grade there, even though, Mike Zimmer, of course, his defense is not going to look incompetent. He is a tremendous X's and O's coach. As long as they're healthy, unlike last year, they're not going to look like they're falling all over themselves. Of course not. And they're great on third downs, as you'd expect. But they also have had a couple opportunities to come up big. Didn't necessarily do that in the last few weeks. Of course, you don't put that all on the coach, but I think there's a lot of room to improve here. I think there's a philosophical type of shift that needs to happen in terms of putting the gas pedal down, that if they don't do, it's going to result in them having a lot more games that are decided by their kicker and who gets the good or bad break. So I think that a lot has to change in the second half. So I'm not giving a very high grade here when you are 2 plays away and, in the last 2 weeks against bad teams from potentially being, 1-5 and talking about coaching change. That's another part too, is when we're having this, could they change coaches and the pressure is on? Hard to say that you deserve an A for the first half of the season.
Yeah, no, if this was around the horn and Tony Reali was giving a point to the correct grade, I think you win. I think that looking at it big picture like that, I think D+ is more appropriate than C+. So props to you.
All
Better
right.
argument.
A fun breakdown of the bye week or at the bye week for the Minnesota Vikings. Sam Ekstrom, Matthew Coller. Make sure you listen to our bye week bonanza, the Purple Insider podcast. I sing and get other guests to sing. So that's something that may turn you off or may make you want to check it out. And also check out our written work, purpleinsider.substack.com. We'll catch you next time. Purple Insider Extra.
Bye week bonanza.